Naar een uitgebreide presentatie waarin u een veel dieper inzicht krijgt. Helaas hebben we er geen ondertitels bij. Maar een veel dieper inzicht krijgt in wat die F-35, de Lockheed Martin F-35A Lightning II. Dat is waar we het over hebben. Dat is de volle naam van onze nieuwe vriendin hier bij de Koninklijke Luchtmacht. Waarin we gaan leren over wat dat vliegtuig allemaal betekent en wat er voor gebeurt. We gaan dus kijken naar een presentatie van Joe Malone van Lockheed Martin.
It's a pleasure to be here. And let me go back here. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I want to congratulate everyone. You know, you set a goal, and you said I think you said the defense minister you wanted this to be here, and they're here. So they're going to come here, and they're going to be on time, and congratulations on that. It was a great goal. So Lockheed Martin has been. We're very excited to be here and supportive of this event. It's interesting seeing how the program has evolved over the last 4 or 5 years. I've been with the company for about 7 years. Previously, before I retired as an Air Force officer, I was an F-16 pilot for 26 years. And so I spent many years flying the aircraft, have about 3,300 hours, had a lot of operational tours. And so when I looked to retire, I looked for the company that I'd been flying with and went to work for Lockheed Martin. And it's very exciting right now to be working on the F-35 because it is the next generation aircraft. And I hope I'm able to communicate that a little bit in today's briefing for you. To start off, I'd like to show a very short film that we did for 2015. It's a milestone film for 2015, and what I want to do is just say that this isn't just about Lockheed hitting milestones. This is about every customer country that you see here, or a service, U.S. Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, hitting specific milestones in the path toward getting this thing developed and completed and starting to be produced at mass rate and getting it out in the field. And so I hope you're able to enjoy the film. Next year for 2016, this event will be part of that film as well. And so I just wanted to highlight that, please. 2015 was an exciting year, but I guarantee 2016 will be even better. So, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That means the airplanes are getting close, I think. Getting closer. So what I'd like to do is just, I'll show some slides, and I'm going to try to add in some additional context as I go through this from things that I've seen and what I've learned and what the program is learning over time. For many of you, you probably know a lot of this already. For some, maybe bring you back up to more of a baseline. So the F-35 is what we call a fifth generation aircraft, and you can see the history timeline there, first generation, second generation. As I came into the base, I saw some of these types of airplanes out at your front gate, the F-16 being the fourth generation type aircraft, the one I flew for many, many years, a great aircraft along with F-15s and F-18s and other aircraft. But when we basically delivered the F-22 with very low observable stealth type capability, along with those attributes of advanced stealth, sensor fusion, net-enabled operations, fighter performance, and advanced sustainment. It really went up to another level. And so the F-35 follows on that. It's not meant to replace the F-22 or compete against the F-22. It actually flies with the F-22 very well. And with the F-35, we add in some things with multispectral sensors, interoperability, weapons types, additional weapons types, and then modernization avionics. In a lot of ways, the F-35, in some ways, it doesn't fly as high and it doesn't fly as fast, and it's not quite as maneuverable as an F-22, and it's not meant to fly as maneuverable. But the F-35 does some other things. It's multi-role. It was designed for air-to-ground, but it also brings in air-to-air capability just as well, and it does other things, a lot of other things. And so that's what you're getting when you buy into the F-35, and you're part of that partnership, that cooperation, that cooperative partnership, not just with the U.S., but a lot of other countries buying into the aircraft as well. We've learned a lot of things on stealth. It's taken a long time. It started back in the 1960s with the SR-71. There were applications, there were things that were designed into the SR-71 to make it smaller than it appeared. It was big and it was loud and it was fast, but they tried to reduce the signature on some things, and we've learned some things. The F-117 obviously broke new grounds, and it was a surprise to a lot of people. It was a single mission aircraft. It flew at night. It did not have advanced avionics, but it did its mission very well because it was unseen. The B-2 from Northrop Grumman was another step, large aircraft, and certainly we've learned a lot working with Northrop Grumman as part of the F-35 program. And then the F-22. There's things that we've learned off the F-22 and we've made better, especially on the sustainment side. We've learned a whole lot of new things in designing and building and putting together the F-35. So it does help lower the operational sustainment costs for the aircraft over a long period of time. I do want to put some context into this type of thing. So I'm going to do it out of an anecdote of just my experience flying against a stealth type fighter. And it's hard to appreciate after flying the F-16 for so long, why aren't I just as good? Okay, and I saw some F-16 pilots, and I'm very proud of that airplane that I flew, and you all have flown. But when you fly when you fly against the F-22 or you fly the F-35, you're stepping it up a whole nother level. Okay, the way I can kind of compare this, I flew against the F-22 back in 2003 and 4 when it was going through operational test, and it's doing much better now even from then. But when I flew against it, I was the Red Flag commander in Nellis Air Force Base at Las Vegas, and I owned the aggressors. They were assigned under me, and I flew with them routinely, and we would fly the aggressors as adversaries against the F-22 in operational test and evaluation. And I flew against it about 10 times. The people that I was flying with were very experienced F-16, F-15 pilots. We were flying in the cleanest configuration for an F-16, no wings, no wing tanks, no pylons, just missiles on the wingtips. We had tankers, we had a lot of support. We were in the cleanest configuration, the low observable configuration for an F-16. And we'd fly against the F-22, and it was just a humbling experience. We never saw them. I never could find them on our radar, an F-16 radar. Every time we'd flow against them, if we flew 2-ship, 4-ship, 8-ship, it didn't matter. We would basically get shot, and we would return, and we'd try to do it again, and we'd get shot, and we'd return, and we'd get shot, and we'd do it again. And so there were 2 lessons I learned out of flying against the F-22, a stealth-type fighter, is one, in an F-16 with very experienced aircrew around me, I could not beat it. My team could not beat it, okay? And The second thing was the combat air force as a whole and the U.S. Air Force could not satisfy the training appetite for an F-6, F-22 unit once they became operational, because you could send 4 up against it one day and they would kill you, and you would go back, and then you would send 8 up the next day and you'd send 16 the next day, and it would always beat you, okay? And so it was just because it was so much better. The way to kind of compare this is if you're familiar with boxing, if you're a boxer and you're in a ring, and I was the F-16 pilot or a 4th generation legacy type aircraft, I would have my arms tied to my waist like this, okay, and I'd have a blindfold on, and I'd be swinging as hard as I could, but I wouldn't hit anything, okay? But I was facing an adversary who was on the other side of the ring, and he had full reach with his arms, and he was swinging like crazy, and he had eyes wide open. He had no blindfold. He could see everything. And that was about what it was like fighting against the F-22. And the F-35, I think you'll find is about the same experience. So when your pilots land today and you are able to talk to your 4 pilots, please ask them what it's like. Please ask them what they're experiencing. Even with today's jets that aren't fully operational capable with the full software suite yet, ask them how that experience has been. I'd like to show a real quick video of Lieutenant Colonel Smith. He was the commander of the Operational Test Squadron at Edwards Air Force Base, and so I'll just let him talk about flying the airplane. Lori? So it's really hard to understand what it means to fly a stealth type airplane until you really experience that.
I am Lieutenant Colonel Eric Smith, an F-35A instructor pilot. If you look back at some of the programs, like the X-1, that define how the Air Force got to where it is today, that's what really made me want to become a test pilot. The X-1 program broke the sound barrier. The barriers that we're breaking in today's flight test are more related to technology. The aircraft that the Air Force are flying currently and the ones that the F-35 are going to replace, those are typically thought of as 4th generation airplane. 4th generation airplanes have a lot of systems. When they were designed, a lot of those systems didn't exist. What really makes the F-35 a 5th generation airplane is the combination of stealth, advanced avionics that includes data link, voice communications, messaging formats, and a multispectral integrated sensor suite. The helmet and the airplane have sensors in them so that it tracks the location of the helmet and which direction the helmet is pointed, so that when I look through the skin of the airplane, I see what is underneath the jet. I can see things now that I was unable to see before without maneuvering my airplane. The F-35 takes the most powerful processing and computing power available today and puts it on an airframe. There's no way for a single human being to process all the information that comes into an F-35. So the engineers have done a great job of taking all that information, doing a lot of the thinking for the pilot, and then displaying it to the pilot so he can make those split-second decisions. The F-35 is amazing. Being involved in the F-35 program has been the most rewarding job that I've had in my 20-year Air Force career.
Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. This is a picture of an F-35A, just like the airplane that you'll be getting or seeing today. It's a Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and it's the first operational base. This is one of 12 airplanes that we've delivered to Hill in the last few months. You can see there some of the specific characteristics. It's about the same length as an F-16, but it's a little bit wider. It's 38 feet versus about 32 feet. You can see that it's 1.6 Mach, and it pulls, and the A model has 9G capability. You can load the weapons bay with full weapons, 2 missiles and two 2,000-pound bombs, and you can go you can go to 1.6 Mach in that configuration, and you can pull 9Gs in that configuration. The airplane's performing well. One other thing I'd like to highlight is it says 55,000 hours that we've flown so far. We've actually got about 59, almost 60,000 hours now with the aircraft, and it's moving along. We're flying about 2,500 hours per month And as we deliver more and more airplanes, that number will keep going up. The target is 200,000 hours. When we see 200,000 hours, then we can basically say that the airplane has matured, and we can use the data that we've collected on the airplane to roll into the sustainment, okay, picture. Up until now, we've been using legacy sustainment type things to estimate cost. But when we hit 200,000 hours, we'll be able to roll in the data from the F-35. This airplane represents AN1 and AN2 that are coming in today. I would just like to highlight that the Netherlands' contribution to the system development demonstration has been very important. AN1 and 2 originally were delivered to Eglin Air Force Base, and they're used part of training the initial pilots that have been on the aircraft. And we've now trained up over 300. Once that initial training was accomplished, the airplanes were relocated to Edwards Air Force Base, and they're part of the development test, and they'll be follow-on for operational tests for the aircraft. And they're very important to accomplish that task. And so we very much appreciate the contribution the airplane's making right now in the United States. They'll continue to do the testing and helping with the aircraft. We also appreciated the Dutch government's support for F-16. There's an F-16 assigned to Edwards Air Force Base, and it's used to help chase some of the missions that are accomplished at Edwards. So there's been a huge contribution from the Dutch government to help with the overall development of the aircraft. Next slide, please. Some of you may wonder, well, what's the big deal? Why can't we just go back and retrofit older fourth-generation airplanes to be able to get to a stealth configuration? I'd just like to highlight a few things that are required in order to get to that common fisher. And one of the interesting parts is, there's a lot of, well, how come they can do this, okay? It took about 50 years, 60 years to go from SR-71 to where we are today. It's not an easy thing. You can say that you're going to be a fifth-generation, very low observable aircraft, but it's not an easy thing to do. And so when you see pictures and when you see, things that say, hey, we're building that or they're building that or that kind of thing, don't believe everything you hear in that regard. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to, if you did build it, to be able to sustain it for a long time, and so at an affordable cost. So there's a lot that you have to do to make this work, to get to the signature that's required to be almost invisible, so that the adversary can't see you like I was experiencing flying the F-22, flying against the F-22. So the things that are there are internal fuel tanks. If you see a proposal to put conformal wing tanks or put some type of stealth coating on wing tanks, you're just not going to get there. You have to have internal fuel inside the aircraft. And this airplane does that. You can see the fuel numbers over on the far right-hand side. For an F-16, they have about 6,900 pounds of fuel inboard the aircraft on a C model, A model or C model. And this basically has about 2.5 times the amount of internal fuel. If you add on wing tanks, you can get about 11,200 pounds of fuel on the airplane. And again, this is much more fuel to be able to accomplish the mission. For a B model that's replacing the Harrier, it's about 2 times as much as internal fuel. And then the C model, the same thing for replacing an F-18. It's about 2 times the amount of fuel. So the airplane has internal fuel to go the distance. The fixed antenna array, some of the parts are made here in the Netherlands. It's up in the front of the aircraft. I flew an airplane where we had a single dish antenna. It was about this big, about the size of a television antenna, and it was mechanically scanned, and it would take about 12 seconds to go through that scan pattern, and the pilot would have to control it all the time. This airplane has a dish on the front of the airplane, and it's a fixed array, and there's about 1,250 some number of antennas about that big, and every one of them is more powerful and does the job better than the single antenna that I had on my F-16. So it's an incredible capability. It's a huge leap ahead. It's not evolutionary. It's more like a revolutionary kind of improvement, and I'll talk more about it in just a minute. The engine inlets are arranged appropriately, and they're set so that you can basically go supersonic without having movable ramps. If you see an airplane in a picture and they say it's 5th generation stealth and it has ramps that go up and down to try to control the airflow so it can go supersonic, it's not going to be stealth, okay? So this airplane has some things built into it that allow that to happen. When you look down the intake, you can't see the engine. It's buried. For the F-16 pilots in the room, you probably know what I mean. If you see the engine blades on an engine, it's not stealthy, okay? Matter of fact, if you can see the engine blades on that airplane, you can tell exactly what that airplane is from 50 or 100 miles away. So it's got to have buried engine, and this airplane has that. The full line of sight blockage, we just talked about. The aligned edges, everything matches up. I'll show you some pictures front on, heads on when you're out by the airplane. Look at how the tails match up with the side of the fuselage, matches up with everything on the airplane. They're there for a purpose. Every angle on the airplane is blended and it's set specifically to deflect radar signatures. And it's not easy to do unless you design it from the beginning. There's aligned edges. There's reduced signature nozzles, not just for radar signature, but also for heat as well. When you look at the engine, it's a little bit different. So you can kind of look closer to that. And then finally, the big thing is internal storage carriage. If you are going to do conformal type of things to try to load them up against the aircraft, but not inside the aircraft, if you have bombs and missiles hanging out underneath the airplane, you're not going to be very low observable. So all those things add up to something that makes a 5th generation very low observable type capability. The Lieutenant Colonel Smith talked about avionics, and that's really, to me, besides the stealth, it's the new avionics that are in the airplane. It's got advanced radar, like I talked about. It can do both air-to-ground and air-to-air at the same time, and it also can jam. And so it has 3 functions, whereas before, I would either do air-to-air or air-to-ground, and I would have an ECM pod that weighed about 1,000 pounds that was loaded on the bottom of my airplane that would do that, and now the radar does that. So it's a very, very capable type thing. The internal stores, unlike the F-22 or the F-117, this airplane, we can carry about 6,200 pounds of weapons inside the weapons bays. But when you get into a permissive environment where the threat's been beaten down and you now want to carry more ordnance to the fight, you can basically change the airplane into a bomb truck. You can put pylons on the wings, 3 on each wing, and you can carry up to 18,000 pounds of ordnance. So you can go from 6,200 pounds of ordnance to 18,000 pounds of ordnance just by uploading the wings. And so that's a big change from even the F-22 or the F-117. Let's go ahead and show the first video. There's 2 systems that are unique. The first system is called the distributed aperture system on the airplane. It's basically 6 sensors made by Northrop Grumman out of Chicago, Illinois. And it basically provides a missile warning system to the pilot. It's 6 sensors that basically provide a bubble around the aircraft. They are there basically to warn the pilot that something's coming up from the ground or been shot at the pilot from the air, and then let the pilot start defending himself or herself against that threat. And so that's really a unique capability. The other airplanes in the formation are watching this as well. The airplanes know which airplane's being targeted. And so if one airplane's defending, the system is basically figuring out where that missile came from using math and algorithms, and it's going to determine the point of origin pretty close. And because the airplanes have data link and they talk to each other, they're all trying to figure that out. And so the other 2 or 3 airplanes that are with the other aircraft, they're getting the same type of geolocation going on in their airplane. And so by the time the pilot finishes defending against this threat, the airplanes in the formation have figured out the point of origin to where you can actually go and employ ordnance, or you can point a system and monitor where that threat came from and track that threat. And so there's a lot of capability built into this DAS system that, as a pilot, I wish I had when I flew the F-16, and now it's on every airplane delivered. Well, the interesting part of that is all the information that's coming in is mid-wave infrared energy. And we can present that information on the displays in the cockpit to show the pilot something on the ground or in the air to be able to track using this system. Or we can push the information into the visor, and it's selectable on the stick. So the pilot can select, I don't want it, or I do want it. And so in the daytime, it's pretty cool. At nighttime, it basically provides the pilot a night vision goggle kind of capability with a screen about this big. So instead of flying with night vision goggles where the pilot's only seeing through something like this, at nighttime, you can select the DAS image on the visor and get a picture like this. So it's kind of like going from real old movies to an IMAX kind of theater like this. And you replace the requirement for night vision goggles. So, and it's already on everything, so you don't have to switch out the components on your helmet, put them over here and bring out night vision goggles. So it's a new capability that I think the pilots will be very excited about. Lieutenant Colonel Smith talked about using the DAS system to be able to observe things underneath the airplane, and people sometimes talk about being able to see through the airplane. The truth is you're not seeing through metal, okay? What you're seeing is the sensors are seeing underneath the aircraft. And so it's important in a stealth aircraft to be able to fly through the battle space without doing this and rocking up, trying to see what's underneath your airplane, because every time you do this, you're showing some aspect and you're showing your signature. But if you can just fly through the battle space kind of smooth and easy, then you can keep your signature reduced. And by using the DAS system, you can see things underneath the airplane. Go ahead and show the video. Oh, you did the first one. The second video is the EOTS, the electro-optical targeting system. So when I flew the F-16, I had a targeting pod. It was either a lightning pod or a sniper pod. And I would get one of these pods delivered to our base about 2 months before I would go into Iraq or go into Afghanistan, before a unit would deploy. And so we just didn't have enough to go around every aircraft. We would share resources, and we would get just enough training to go in and be able to do the mission, and then they would be taken somewhere else. For this aircraft, they're being delivered with every aircraft, okay? Every single airplane has this system in the nose of the aircraft. And you can see there that you can very selectively, you can be very selective, and you can target weapons, or you can do ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of a specific location to monitor something on the ground very easily. So it's two really great systems that are delivered on every aircraft, and I think the warfighters will take it to another level on what you can do with it. Next slide. This is an exciting view. This is the Dutch tanker, obviously, getting qualified at Edwards Air Force Base. We've had 3 tankers now, besides Air Force tankers. We've had 3 countries get their tankers qualified. So Italy has gotten their tanker qualified, the UK got their tanker qualified, and now the Dutch qualified their tanker with the F-35. And so we're progressively going through this series of requirements to get these kind of assets used. And obviously, you're able to bring your airplanes here today because of that type of training. So it's really an exciting time. We have a major that I think is number 2 in the formation today. I think he made a video, and I'll let him talk to you. He's going to talk in Dutch, so I understand. I've been told what he said, but I don't understand what he said. Okay, so I'll let him talk.
Ik was op uitzending met F-16's om grondtroepen in nood te kunnen helpen. De situatie was als volgt dat er grondtroepen onder vuur lagen van vijandelijke troepen. Ze waren met een patrouillevoertuig het kamp uitgereden, waarna ze in een hinderlaag kwamen. Je bent natuurlijk gelijk scherp, klaar voor actie. Ik keek opzij naar mijn wingman, die geeft ook een duimpel. In zo'n geval doen we een afterburner take-off. Dat betekent dat we echt vol gas geven. Dus helemaal richting de locatie waar de grondtroepen zich bevinden. Waarmee dat we daar aankwamen, zagen dat het echt menens was. Als je naar buiten keek, dan werden ze eigenlijk overdonderd door de hoeveelheid vijand die daar was. Er wordt uiteindelijk om wapeninzet gevraagd. Dan ben je natuurlijk weer even extreem scherp. Er zijn heel veel zaken die je even in een paar seconden eigenlijk als een speer de revue laat passeren. Ten eerste, of het legaal is om in dit geval tot wapeninzet over te gaan. Er zijn heel veel regels, richtlijnen vanuit de VN en ook lokale regelgevers die daarvoor moet checken. Dan is stap 2, oké, wat gaan we dan precies doen voor inzet? Het wapens hebben we bij ons, hoe lang kunnen we ze ondersteunen? Dan is de volgende stap je vliegtuig op een goede manier positioneren. De hoogte moet kloppen, de snelheid moet kloppen, alle andere parameters moeten kloppen. Dus je hebt heel veel academische training gehad, maar ook heel veel vliegtraining om die missies en deze procedures te oefenen. Voordat we tot actie overgaan, zal ik nog 1 keer nagaan of dat het allemaal oké is. Omdat de eindverantwoordelijkheid ligt bij mijzelf in zo'n geval. Want ik ben degene die uiteindelijk tot actie overgaat. Natuurlijk ben je gespannen en is adrenaline daar. Maar ook die rust. Je moet kalm blijven. Rustig. Ik kreeg confirmatie vanaf de grond dat alles veilig was, dat de situatie over was. En nadat we besloten hadden, samenspraak met grondtroepen, we vertrokken weer terug richting onze basis, waar we toen weer veilig landden. Het vliegen in een F-16 of in een F-35 wordt het nooit saai. Het is elke keer een andere missie, een andere taak. Het is altijd interessant dat je altijd scherp moet zijn, altijd beslissing moet maken. Dat maakt het gewoon gaaf.
So I didn't understand the words he was saying, but I've been told what he said was he had a great experience flying the F-16, and he was able to see a change over time with the avionics and the system upgrades that occurred in the F-16. And I hope what he's saying and with the F-35 is he's looking forward to not just where they're at now, but I think in the future it'll continue to get better. I'd like to, on this slide, just talk a little bit about how the test is going. We have about another year worth of testing to be completed out of Edwards and also at Paxton River, Maryland for the B and the C model. 92% of the flight science testing for the A model is complete. The only things left to go out and fly in the envelope, explore the envelope with the A model, the one that the Netherlands are getting, is basically everything above 40,000 feet. The airplane's flown to every corner of the envelope. It's flown high, it's flown slow, it's flown fast. We've dropped ordnance, separations are fine. Takeoff and landings, everything's good. It flies through the weather. All that's been done. The piece that was the last piece for flying that flight envelope was the 40 to 50,000 foot range. And so they're doing that now, and it's the last 8% in all the different configurations the aircraft can fly in. The majority of the flight testing that's going on now is called mission systems testing, where we take a very low observable airplane, basically a stealth airplane along with all the avionics to the most current level, and we basically test everything to the final software block load. Most of you may already know that we've basically developed the airplane with 3 different sets of software, Block 1, Block 2, and Block 3. We've progressively, with each of those blocks, we've had 2 main releases, Block 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B, and now 3I and 3F is the final one. We've done 5 of the 6. Is that the Learjet taking off? We've done 5. We've completed all the testing required for the first 5 releases, and the only testing that now we're doing is the Block 3F testing. And we've done 6 release. We're right now on the 6th release inside Block 3F. And so the interesting part of this is it's no longer about what one airplane's doing. It's what 4 airplanes are doing. We call them super scenarios: air to air and air to ground. And so the airplanes are flying together. They're sharing data link. They're sharing information that each of the sensors in the airplanes are doing, and they're sharing it with each other. And so we're progressively going through the different mission sets, the more difficult mission sets that are required to basically get the airplane completed. And it's going very well. We've had some challenges. We had, when we went to a new computer and we basically put more requirements into it, we had to work some things out. It's basically fine-tuning some of the software, but those things have been sorted out. And so now we're getting, where radar, basically has tripled or quadrupled the times between resets, which is very good. And it is definitely more than spec is required. And we're also basically getting it to where there's very few ambiguities between what one airplane is seeing and what other airplanes are seeing. And that was one of the keys to getting it completed. And so for the rest of 2016 and 17, the main effort is about using the sensors, the integrated sensors in the Fusion, to basically identify a target both on the ground and in the air, moving and stationary, and be able to locate those targets both in clear airspace, in denied airspace, and all weather type conditions, and be able to target weapons and put ordnance on target. And that's what's going to happen. There's a lot of weapons deliveries, a lot of guided type weapons deliveries against those targets in 2016 and 17 to basically prove that the aircraft is ready. Next slide, please. This is the international partnership. You can see there in the U.S. 3 services: Air Force, Marines, and Navy. And then the 8 partners that you see along the sides: the UK, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Italy, Turkey, Australia, and Canada. And then we have 3 FMS customers as well. Israel signed on in 2010. Japan signed on a year later in December 2011. And then Korea came in just behind that. And so very interesting time period. Every country, every customer country, and even the U.S. services have gone through a decision process. sometimes a second decision process, and sometimes a third decision process. And so, every country has to look at their requirements, their military operational requirements. You have to look at the economic conditions. You have to look at the political type situations, administration changes, things like that. And you have to go through those decisions. So as you go through it, you can see the UK went through a process. The Netherlands went through a process. Denmark just down selected on the 12th of May and basically selected the F-35 and going forward with that. Norway has been very firm with the program. Italy is producing airplanes. Turkey is buying airplanes. Australia is doing well. And then Canada is going through a process right now. And so from Lockheed Martin's perspective, this is part of what we have to do. It's the democratic thing that we have to support and work through it. And we have to realize that each customer is just a little different. So what we've seen is great support, and we're very appreciative of that. Strong commitment, in some cases, looking at it twice and sometimes 3 times. But from each of the services, each of those customer countries, everyone is committed to this. And even Canada is going through that process, but they still remain committed to the partnership. They're helping contribute to the development of the aircraft even today. And so we have to respect that, and we have to continue forward with that. So it's an exciting time. Next slide, please. This is where we are today. By the end of this year, you'll see we've delivered 175 airplanes so far. There's about another 25 to be delivered this year. You can see at some of those locations, the color codes are based on the variant A, B, or C. You can see about 50 aircraft at Eglin Air Force Base now. Edwards has about 29 by the end of this year. Luke Air Force Base has about 41 by the end of the year. They have 37 right now. Nellis Air Force Base, we're home of the fighter pilot. They have 10. They'll get a couple more this year. The big one is Hill Air Force Base. They have 12 aircraft, and by the end of the year, they'll have 17. Hopefully this fall, somewhere between August 1st and December 31st, we'll see the Air Force declare IOC with their aircraft and continue to go forward. We expect the Navy to declare IOC in 2017. We'll see Israel get their first airplanes and deploy them into Israel by the end of this year. We'll see Japan get their first airplanes this year, and they'll go to Luke Air Force Base for initial training. So it's a very exciting time for the program, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and you're part of that. If we could do one more slide, I'll show you a picture of 2020. You can see there are over 600 and almost 620 aircraft between the U.S. and then the partners and FMS. We're transitioning from a kind of a U.S.-based Air Force, Navy, Marine, most of the deliveries going to those services, to where within about 2 or 3 years, we're going to basically double the amount of production that we're doing right now. And I think we're going to double the amount of production that we have right now. Right now, we're producing, we're going to deliver 53 aircraft this year, and within 3 years, we're going to be over 100 aircraft per year. And the big thing about that is the international deliveries. We're basically going to be almost 50% of the total deliveries. So what you see right now is countries like, when I go out on the flight line, when I go down the production line, I see airplanes from Norway being delivered as part of LRIP 8, Israel, Italy, Japan, and those additional countries that are going to come onto the program and start getting more airplanes will be the Dutch, Turkey, and then other countries as well. So it's really a very exciting time right now for the program. Next slide. I talked with a couple people from the defense industry, representing defense industry for the Netherlands. It's a real interesting time when you look at the aircraft and see what's being built here. The trailing edge flaps is a big part of the aircraft, and they're built here, as well as the weapons bay doors. Landing gear, a big part of that. A big effort was done on the C model to redesign the hook, and Volker did a great job on getting that redesign, and it's doing very well, and the Navy is very pleased, and they're moving forward with the program because of it. So some great work being done. The wire harnesses were always difficult. For the F-16, I remember going up in the wire room at Lockheed Martin in Fort Worth. Back then it was General Dynamics, and seeing the people putting the wires together. All of that is done here in the Netherlands. I mean, all of it. It's completely being done here. And so really exciting time. Other companies here, Thales is working on radar components for Northrop Grumman. The Norway, the composite drag chute, the fairing is being built here. So a lot of work is being done here in the Netherlands, and I think right now 25 companies are involved, about $1 billion worth of work that's already being committed to Dutch industry. And by the time we get to full rate production and go through the life cycle of production and sustainment, I think the estimate's over $10.7 billion. So I think as part of the partnership and being able to participate with industrial participation, you know, it's never enough, but I think the Dutch industry has done very well. I'd also like to add that, you know, it's very evident that the Dutch industry is delivering very good quality products. So, you know, when you look at the different types of work being done, the components are being delivered on time, the quality is good, and you're definitely meeting best value requirements that the program expects. And so I think that's very important. You know, you have people that are very well trained. They've learned a lot through the F-16 program that was here before, and I think we're reaping the benefit of that as well. So thank you. Next slide, please. In summary, I'll get off the stage, okay, and be available to talk or do this. But today we have 10 operating bases, and 180 plus airplanes are flying when you add in the test aircraft. We're nearly surpassed 60,000 flying hours. We have more than 300 pilots, 2,700 maintainers that have been trained. I think 27 Dutch maintainers have been trained along with the 4 pilots. We have right now 120 aircraft under construction worldwide. In Fort Worth, we have 75 being assembled in Fort Worth right now. I already talked about the 4 Dutch pilots, the 28 maintainers. The next jets to be delivered will be in 2019. I think they're coming here. Will be the first deliveries there, so really exciting time for the Netherlands. In total, there'll be 37 jets total. 29 jets will be built in the FACO in Italy, and we have 6 more to complete in Fort Worth in addition to the 2 that have already been built. So kind of an exciting time for you. Next slide, please. And I think that's the last. I'll just open it up for questions, okay? And I'm ready for almost anything. If I'm not, I'll defer them to, there he goes, yeah. And I think he has a microphone. If you have a question, he'll bring the microphone to you, and he'll probably have to translate if you speak in Dutch, so. Did I answer all your questions?
Can you please give a brief explanation between the 23A, B, and C?
Okay, all right. The question was, can I give a brief description between the A and the B and the C? And I don't have a slide to do that, but I can talk to it. Okay. And so originally, when the idea was first, when JSF was kind of just a concept, there were 5 programs in the Pentagon being worked between the Air Force, Navy, and the Marine Corps to replace aging aircraft. And so what was interesting was during a budget cutting kind of process in the Pentagon, they said, we're gonna scope this down, and we're gonna go from 5 to 2 programs. We're gonna build an airplane that can basically fly for the Air Force and the Navy, carrier qualified, that can do a multi-role replacement for F-16s, A-10s, and F-18s. And then we're gonna replace the Harrier with another aircraft. And a year later, the US Congress came in and said, why don't you neck down and make the Harrier replacement the JSF also, okay? And so that like quadruply, exponentially created a bigger problem to solve, okay? Because the STOVL was not easy to do. When you look at the STOVL today, there's 9 additional doors that have to open and close sequentially to allow STOVL operation to happen. And when you see it on the video, it's quite amazing. You saw it on the year in review there. When you see it in person, maybe at Riyadh or Farnborough this year, it's something to behold, okay? You can't almost, your eyes can't quite comprehend what you're seeing when you see a 42,000-pound airplane hover, okay, and then it just turns, and it turns this way, and the pilot can almost go hands off, okay? The pilot can literally take his hands off the control, his or her hands off the control while the airplane's doing it. So it's an amazing airplane. The A and the B and the C fly about the same conventionally. They all take off and land on your runway out here. They could all do that, okay? The difference between the A, B, and the C is the B can do short takeoff and vertical landing also, and the C can land on a U.S. aircraft carrier. And that's the big difference. The C model is a little bit bigger. It has more titanium. The backbone of the airplane is titanium. There's more titanium in the bulkheads in the wing structure, so it weighs more. It has a bigger wing. The A model and the B model have about a 460 square foot wing. The C model has about a 640 square foot wing. The tail surface is bigger. The vertical tails are bigger. The landing gear is bigger. The nose gear has 2 tires, not just 1 tire, like the A and the B does, okay? So the C model is built bigger, more rugged, larger wing in order to basically come aboard the U.S. aircraft carrier at a slower speed and take off on the catapult. So that's the big difference on the C model, okay? In the B model, about the same as the A, except weight was a big factor to be allowed to do a vertical landing. So there's no titanium at all in the B model. So it weighs more than the A because of the extra engine. The Rolls-Royce engine weighs about almost 5,000 pounds. And so they had to be very critical of the weight in the B model. So it's a 7G airplane. They couldn't put titanium in the bulkheads that are required to get it to 9Gs. The B model doesn't have a hook because the engine swivels down about 110 degrees, up to 110 degrees, to allow it to get vertical, do the vertical landing. And so because of that, there's no space in the back end to put a hook, okay? For all variants, the hook has to go, for both the A and the C, the hook has to come up into the fuselage and hide, unlike an F-16 or an F-18 or an F-15. The hook has to be hidden inside the aircraft, and the doors have to close to make it stealth. And so that became a development challenge to basically hide the hook, but be able to still catch the wire when you try to catch the cable. All of the aircraft share some commonality. They all have the same hydraulic type systems. They all have the same avionics, 100% the same avionics. The cockpit's the same, the software is the same. And so you can share the cost of developing avionics, software, the cockpit, all that stuff is shared cost across all the customers. And so it helps lower the cost, not just for the original development and production of the aircraft, but for the lifetime cost of upgrading and modernizing it. Most of it's involved in avionics and software. And so you can share that cost with every customer for the airplane across all 3 variants. And so those are the main differences. They all take off and land conventionally. The avionics software make them where they fly in the airspace the same way. It's just takeoff and landing that's different, okay? And there's the differences are because of that. Okay, great question. I know a lot of people have questions about noise, okay? And that's the big hidden question right now. You know, it's an airplane, it's a jet aircraft, okay? It's a single engine jet aircraft, has 40,000 pounds of thrust, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's an equivalent, you know, because you have additional thrust, that you have that much more noise. It doesn't equate to that. And I would just ask you to listen to the airplane when it comes in. I think it's planned to do a low approach, come in, fly around a little bit, and then come in and land. It's about the same as an F-16, F-18, or an F-15, or an F-22. I think probably from an operational perspective, it's more subjective in that respect. How you fly the airplane in the local area, how you take off and land, how you fly pattern work, those are things that the operators can help control a little bit. And so the airplane, fully configured, fully loaded for an operational mission, a training mission, is a clean configuration. And you can do that in a mil power type takeoff instead of using afterburner. And so what we're seeing at Luke Air Force Base, where we're flying the airplane close to Phoenix, Arizona, is most of the sorties being flown are done in military power, which is a lower power setting. And it just doesn't create the same environment that even the F-16 was creating, having to use afterburner every time when the wings were loaded. So there's a lot more discussion on it. I know there's I know there's going to be a great, really interesting noise process that you're going to have over the next week, and so I really look forward to seeing some of the results from that. Okay, anything else? I'll get off the stage. He's hinting to me. Thank you very much.